Most people think the moment to worry is when someone raises their voice. But with Libra, the moment worth noticing is often much quieter. Libra is known for seeking balance. They tend to look at both sides, smooth over tension, and search for words that keep a conversation from becoming a fight. That is why their silence can feel different. It rarely appears out of nowhere. A Libra does not usually stop talking after one disagreement. More often, the silence arrives after a series of moments that seemed small at the time. A concern that was brushed aside, a feeling that was never fully heard, an effort to keep the peace that slowly became exhausting. From the outside, nothing looks different. The conversation still happens, the routines remain the same, yet something beneath the surface has begun to shift. And when that shift begins, the silence is not the story. It is the signal that a deeper story has already been unfolding for much longer than anyone realized. One of the biggest misunderstandings about Libra is the belief that they are always comfortable, always calm, and always unbothered. Because Libra often knows how to create a pleasant atmosphere, people sometimes assume that harmony comes naturally to them. What they do not always see is how much effort goes into maintaining that harmony in the first place. A Libra may spend far more time thinking about a conversation than they ever reveal. They replay words, they consider different perspectives, they ask themselves whether they are being fair, whether the other person is under stress, whether there is another explanation they have not considered yet. While some signs react immediately, Libra often pauses. They observe, they weigh. That is why their silence rarely appears overnight. Before the silence, there is usually a long period of adjustment. They soften their language, they become more patient, they explain things in different ways, they try to create understanding instead of conflict. In many cases, they are not looking to win an argument, they are looking for balance. They want both people to leave the conversation with their dignity intact. But there is a limit to how long anyone can carry that responsibility alone. When Libra begins to feel that their efforts are no longer being met halfway, something starts changing beneath the surface. Not dramatically, not loudly, quietly. They may stop bringing up certain topics. They may stop correcting misunderstandings. They may decide that explaining themselves one more time will not create a different outcome. From the outside, these changes seem small, yet each one represents a choice to conserve energy that has been spent too many times without producing real connection. This is why Libra's silence should not automatically be interpreted as indifference. In many situations, it means the opposite. It may mean they still care enough to notice every detail. They still see the imbalance. They still feel the distance. The difference is that they are no longer certain their words can fix it. The gift of Libra is harmony. The shadow of Libra is sometimes believing harmony can be maintained through endless accommodation. Over time, that pattern can create quiet resentment, not because Libra wants conflict, but because avoiding conflict for too long often postpones truths that eventually need to be spoken. The deeper lesson is not that Libra should become harder or more confrontational. The lesson is that peace and honesty cannot survive separately for very long. Eventually, one must support the other. And when Libra's silence finally appears, it is often the first visible sign that the balance they worked so hard to maintain has already begun to shift. But the silence did not begin in the conversation itself. It began behind a mask that most people never noticed. Libra is often associated with balance, but balance is not always as effortless as it appears. Sometimes it comes from a habit that begins early in life, learning how to read a room before speaking, noticing tension before anyone mentions it, and adjusting their own behavior to keep everything running smoothly. Because of this, many Libras become skilled at maintaining harmony. They know when to lighten a conversation, they know when to change the subject, they know when to let a small irritation go for the sake of a larger peace. These abilities can be beautiful strengths. They help people feel comfortable. They help relationships recover from misunderstandings. They help create connection. But every strength has a shadow. The problem begins when Libra spends so much energy managing the emotional climate around them that they stop checking the weather inside themselves. A Libra may notice that someone is stressed and decide not to bring up an issue. They may sense that a friend is overwhelmed and postpone a difficult conversation. They may tell themselves that timing matters, that patience is wise, that understanding should come before reaction. And often they are right. The challenge is that when this pattern repeats too many times, their own feelings can slowly move to the bottom of the priority list. What looks like peace from the outside may actually be postponement. What looks like patience may sometimes be avoidance. What looks like understanding may occasionally come at the cost of self-expression. This is where the mask of harmony begins to form. Not a dishonest mask, not a manipulative one, a mask built from good intentions, a smile that says everything is fine when something still needs to be discussed, a calm response that hides disappointment, a polite agreement that covers a deeper disagreement. Over time, these small moments accumulate. The issue is rarely one major betrayal or one dramatic argument. More often, it is a collection of tiny experiences. Feeling unheard during important conversations, watching concerns get minimized, realizing that being accommodating has become an expectation rather than a choice. Many people never notice this process because Libra rarely announces it while it is happening. They continue showing up. They continue being kind. They continue keeping the atmosphere pleasant. But internally, they may be asking a question they have avoided for a long time. Am I creating harmony or am I disappearing inside it? That question changes everything. Because once Libra becomes aware of the gap between external peace and internal truth, the silence starts making sense. It is not always about withdrawing from another person. Sometimes it is about reconnecting with themselves. The real growth for Libra is not learning how to keep everyone happy. It is learning that honesty and kindness are not opposites. And when that realization arrives, the mask begins to crack, revealing something deeper beneath the surface. Because the story is no longer just about harmony. It is about value, self-respect, and what happens when Libra starts weighing their own needs with the same care they give everyone else's. Libra is ruled by Venus, a planet often associated with beauty, connection, harmony, and the desire to create something pleasing between people. Because of that influence, many Libras instinctively look for the most graceful path through conflict. They tend to value respect over domination, dialogue over confrontation, and understanding over being right. But Venus is not only about beauty. Venus is also about value. And that distinction matters. A healthy Libra does not simply ask, how can we keep the peace? They also ask, what is worth my time, my effort, and my emotional energy? The challenge is that these two questions do not always lead to the same answer. There are moments when maintaining harmony feels meaningful. There are also moments when maintaining harmony starts costing too much. A Libra may continue giving patience long after frustration appears. They may continue offering understanding long after they feel understood themselves. They may continue extending grace because they genuinely believe people deserve room to grow. Yet eventually another realization begins to surface. Understanding someone does not erase the impact of their behavior. Seeing another person's struggles does not automatically solve your own. And being compassionate does not require abandoning your own needs. This is often the turning point. Not a dramatic awakening, not a sudden decision, more like a quiet shift in perspective. The same Libra who once spent hours explaining may begin speaking less. The same Libra who once rushed to repair every misunderstanding may become more selective about where their energy goes. The same Libra who always searched for common ground may start asking whether both people are actually participating in that search. When a Libra goes silent, it can be helpful to look at what happened before the silence appeared. Was there a concern that kept getting dismissed? Was there a conversation that never reached a real resolution? Was there an apology that sounded sincere but was never followed by change? Small moments matter. People often focus on the silence itself while overlooking the experiences that created it. And that is why the silence can feel confusing from the outside. The visible change happens late in the process. The invisible process has often been unfolding for much longer. Imagine a garden that has been carefully tended for years. The flowers do not disappear the first day they stop receiving enough water. The change happens gradually. The colors remain for a while. The appearance stays familiar. Yet something essential is no longer being nourished. Libra's silence often follows a similar pattern. The warmth does not vanish instantly. The effort does not disappear overnight. But little by little, energy stops flowing where it no longer feels valued. And when that happens, the silence is not necessarily a rejection of another person. Sometimes it is simply the moment Libra begins returning to themselves. The question then becomes, how do you recognize that the scales have already started to move? One reason Libra's silence can be difficult to understand is that it rarely arrives with an announcement. There is usually no dramatic speech, no sudden explosion, no clear moment where everyone in the room realizes something has changed. Instead, the shift often happens through small signals. The first sign is usually not distance, it is effort. A Libra who once tried to explain their perspective from multiple angles may stop explaining altogether. Not because they no longer have thoughts, but because they no longer believe repeating them will create a different outcome. The second sign is a change in curiosity. Libra often shows care through engagement. They ask questions, they remember details, they check in on things that matter to the people around them. When that curiosity begins fading, it is worth paying attention. Not because Libra has stopped caring completely, but because they may be protecting energy that feels unreciprocated. Another sign is the disappearance of emotional mediation. Many Libras naturally step into the role of peacemaker. They smooth rough edges, they help people understand each other, they look for common ground when tension appears. But when the scales begin to shift, they may stop volunteering for that role. They no longer feel responsible for carrying the emotional weight of every interaction. There is also a change in how they respond to conflict. A younger or less self-aware Libra may avoid conflict entirely. A more mature Libra understands that some conversations are necessary. Yet when silence appears, it often means they have become tired of conversations that circle the same problem without producing growth. You may notice shorter answers, less enthusiasm, fewer attempts to rescue awkward moments, more observation and less participation. These signs are subtle. In fact, that is exactly why people often miss them. They wait for a dramatic ending while the real story is unfolding in quiet details. What makes this important is that Libra's silence is not always directed at another person. Sometimes it reflects a conversation happening internally. They are asking themselves difficult questions. What am I responsible for here? What am I not responsible for? Where does compassion end and self-neglect begin? Have I been seeking harmony or have I been avoiding discomfort? These questions represent growth even when the process feels uncomfortable. The shadow side of Libra is believing that keeping the peace is always the highest priority. The growth path is recognizing that genuine peace cannot exist without honesty. That is why the silence should not automatically be viewed as something negative. Sometimes it is a pause. Sometimes it is reflection. Sometimes it is the space needed to separate obligation from desire, expectation from truth. And in that space, something unexpected often begins to happen. The energy that was once spent managing everyone else starts returning to the person who gave it away. That is where the real transformation begins. There is a common assumption that when someone becomes quiet, they are moving away from themselves. But for Libra, the opposite can sometimes be true. There are moments when silence is not withdrawal. It is return. After spending so much time considering the needs, feelings, expectations, and perspectives of everyone around them, Libra may eventually find themselves standing in unfamiliar territory, a place where the central question is no longer, how do I make this work for everyone? But rather, what is actually true for me? That shift can feel uncomfortable at first. Libra is naturally wired toward connection. They often feel most like themselves when relationships are healthy, communication is flowing, and the atmosphere around them feels balanced. So When they begin pulling back, there is often a temptation to immediately restore what was lost, to smooth things over, to explain again, to give one more chance, to carry one more conversation. Sometimes that instinct is valuable. Sometimes it is simply a familiar pattern. The real turning point comes when Libra starts recognizing the difference. They begin noticing where their energy is genuinely creating connection and where it is only maintaining appearances. They begin noticing the relationships that grow through mutual effort and the ones that survive almost entirely because of their willingness to accommodate. This realization is rarely dramatic. It often arrives through small moments of clarity. A conversation where they no longer feel the need to defend their feelings. A situation where they stop apologizing for having reasonable boundaries. A moment where they realize they have been asking for something simple all along: respect, honesty, consistency, or genuine consideration. And perhaps the most surprising discovery is this: the world does not fall apart when Libra stops carrying everything. The responsibility they quietly accepted for years was often much larger than the responsibility that actually belonged to them. This is the hidden blessing within Libra's silence. Not that someone else suffers, not that someone else suddenly regrets every mistake. The blessing is that Libra begins hearing their own voice again, without constant negotiation, without constant adjustment, without constantly measuring their needs against everyone else's expectations. The gift of Libra has never been self-sacrifice. The gift of Libra is balance, and true balance requires two sides. It cannot exist when one person continually gives while the other continually receives. It cannot exist when peace is purchased through silence that hides important truths. As Libra starts reclaiming their energy, something begins to settle inside them. Not anger, not revenge. Something much quieter. Clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when the scales finally stop reacting to every outside influence and begin finding their natural center again. And from that center, Libra is able to step forward differently than before. Not harder, not colder, just more honest. One of the most important things to understand about Libra's silence is that it is rarely the final chapter. It is often an in-between space. A place where old patterns are questioned, priorities are rearranged, and a different version of Libra slowly begins to emerge. Many people expect transformation to look dramatic. They expect a complete personality change, a sudden burst of confidence, or a sharp break from the past. But Libra's growth often happens in a quieter way. The change appears in their decisions. The Libra who once explained themselves 5 times may explain themselves once. The Libra who once accepted emotional ambiguity may start asking direct questions. The Libra who once tolerated ongoing imbalance may become more willing to acknowledge it. From the outside, these changes can seem small, yet they represent something significant. For a long time, Libra's focus may have been on preserving connection. As they mature, another priority begins to stand beside it: preserving self-respect. Neither one is sacrificed. Both are honored. That is what makes this stage different from simple withdrawal or avoidance. Libra is not learning how to care less. They are learning how to care without abandoning themselves. This shift also changes the way they approach relationships. They become less interested in endless potential and more interested in consistent behavior. Less interested in promises and more interested in follow-through. Less interested in keeping peace at any cost, and more interested in building trust that can actually support peace. And perhaps most importantly, they stop viewing every disagreement as a threat to connection. A mature Libra begins to understand that honesty does not automatically create division. In healthy relationships, honesty creates clarity, and clarity allows both people to see where they truly stand. For those who have a Libra in their life, this is worth remembering. If a Libra has become quiet, focus less on the silence itself and more on what came before it. Think about the conversations that were left unfinished. Think about the concerns that were acknowledged but never addressed. Think about the moments when understanding was requested but not fully given. The silence is often pointing towards something that needed attention long before the silence arrived. And for Libra, there is a lesson here as well. Silence can be a valuable pause. It can create perspective. It can restore balance. But eventually, balance asks for something more than reflection. It asks for truth. The strongest version of Libra is not the one who never creates discomfort. It is the one who can remain kind while being honest, remain fair while setting boundaries, and remain open-hearted without carrying responsibilities that do not belong to them. That is the Libra who returns from silence, not unchanged, not hardened, but clearer, wiser, and far more aligned with who they truly are. When a Libra goes silent, it is easy to focus on the absence of words, but the silence itself is rarely the whole story. More often, it is the result of a long process that began long before anyone noticed a change. At their best, Libra reminds us that balance is not about avoiding every difficult conversation. It is about creating enough honesty, respect, and understanding for both people to be seen clearly. If you are a Libra, remember this: you do not have to choose between kindness and truth. The healthiest version of balance makes room for both. And if you love a Libra, listen not only to what they say, but also to what they have been trying to say all along. Because true harmony is not built on silence. It is built on feeling safe enough to be heard.